What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, I'll excuse my voice every now and then. I know you weren't feeling great yesterday either, so I'm glad you're back today.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear your voice as well. You don't sound bad at all, my friend. We're and plus, who can blame either of us for falling into a swoon every now and then with the amount of news that's coming at us. And if you think we're having a rough day, imagine poor Francois Legault.
Let's get to. We have a couple of polls out today, right? One federally, one provincially. Let's start with the provincial poll.
Well, the provincial one, as far as I'm concerned, it's Palace. It was conducted for l'actualité and QC 125, which is run by our friend
Philip Fournier.
Yes, indeed, the astrophysicist. I remember what he does. I keep forgetting his name. But the fact is, and as we heard Jason tell us in the news, yes, they are majority territory. They're not overwhelmingly ahead of the CAQ, 34-22. I mean, things can change. But what's crazy is when you look down to subsets, Aaron, the PQ holds just 4 of the 125 seats in the National Assembly. They're manifested by the presence of basically Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, and it says something about how Quebec is, according to this poll, really repudiating Francois Legault and the CAQ, that the PQ is not just leading overall. The PQ is leading in every single region of Quebec. The PQ is leading the CAQ in the greater Montreal area, i.e., never mind the island of Montreal, we'll get to that and the hapless Liberals in a second. But if you look at the greater Montreal area, the 450, which I always used to refer to as CAQ land, forget about it. The PQ has reclaimed it. Back in the day, it was split between the PQ and the Liberals. Now it's PQ land from one end to the other. Quebec City, PQ. Regions, PQ. And most importantly, older voters, aged 55 to 64, 65 and up, PQ is leading the CAQ by 8 or 9 points. The margin of error on this thing is only 3%. So you know what? They've got real problems. I know we still have a long way until the next general election, but every single indicator for the CAQ, for Francois Legault, for anything he and his party have to do with, is down. And it's been going that way, of course, for the past year, since that last infamous by-election in Jean Talon, which I think the first anniversary is going to be this week. I think it's either Thursday or Friday. And the fact is, Aaron, this is a collapse, in real time. I mean, we're not seeing, people running, screaming from the National Assembly, but we are seeing this so-called third option. This change in Quebec politics is simply crumbling up and withering away, frankly, because people have figured out that the CAQ, as I say, has no idea what they're doing. They never did. They are just a model spouting machine, the same way as Justin Trudeau. And the fact is, even though there are only 4 members of the caucus and the PQ has the issue of sovereignty around its neck, by comparison, by performance, by presence, the PQ is whipping every other opposition party, and they seem, to the public's perception, which, as we both know, is a lot of the game. They're the people who are best suited to lead. That people are listening to, that people are trusting for solutions, and that people are also finding. And we've had this conversation in the past, specifically about Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. He doesn't sound like he's freaking out all the time, unlike Francois Legault. So there you go, and I don't see how this is going to turn around. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I'm developing the conviction that by the time the next election rolls around, Francois Legault is not going to be part of the equation.
Yeah, you think he's not going to be part of the equation. You don't think Justin Trudeau will be around. Two interesting takes. I can't help but think, Jim, as you talk about how things have gone badly for the CAQ, if you go back to the by-election loss. Yeah. And you think about the fact that all this, could you even imagine this 2 years ago? All this had to do with a road in Quebec City.
Yep.
And that began to turn the tide. No one could have seen that coming.
But, Aaron, lest we forget, they had campaigned in 2022. This was the mainstay of their campaign, this link between Quebec City and Lévis. And it wasn't just a local problem now. They turned around, not only did they renege on it, they made it clear that, they discovered that they knew even before they publicly reneged that this was never going to happen. People I don't care what your leanings are. People don't like to be taken advantage of. And a real problem with the CAQ is this presumption that because we're the CAQ, because we had such great numbers, we could get away with anything that we wanted. Clearly, reality has come in with a bang for this party, and they're discovering that there's damn near nothing they can get away with now, or at least not do without having public scrutiny focused on it, and more criticism being leveled at them. Francois Legault, I mean, every single day he sounds a little more at a loss as to how to do his job. And as I say, I'm not going to bet on his being around as party leader, certainly by the next general election, and perhaps even by the end of this year.
I will point out, by the way, there is a by-election at some point coming up in Terrebonne. Maybe the situation or the question now is not will they lose that seat as well, but by how much? By how much,
and in fact, if the PQ, and this was a PQ or riding in the past up until the CAQ sweep back in 2018, if the PQ come and take it back, does this basically make them inevitable when you're considering the state of the other opposition parties right now, or is there some way that this is going to turn around? And remember, I know people call the show when they're concerned. Believe me, this is on the one hand good news for Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, but very bad news as well, because it doesn't matter how popular the PQ is, their fundamental raison d'etre, the option of sovereignty, remains scorned by almost 70% of Quebecers. And this is a circle he's going to have to square in time for the next election.
We move from the provincial poll to an abacus poll. This is a federal poll, and just basically more bad news for the Liberals. But maybe the most interesting takeaway here, Jim, is the NDP nationally everywhere except Quebec.
Well, I have to tell you, it's you're going to see the orphaned Liberals go somewhere. I am so distracted now, though, and I first heard this you were talking to Dimitri Soudis last Thursday about whether the Liberal Party, and he suggested that Trudeau's going to prorogue Parliament, and that's when he'll leave. And I remember listening to that, and it's one of those things, like I tell you, sometimes I yell at the radio. But in this particular instance, I found myself nodding my head in agreement. It made perfect sense. It's a perfect way for him to kind of, on the one hand, abandon ship and not look as if he's sort of clawing through the crowd to get to a lifeboat. But will it be enough to save the party? I don't think so. But all that said, I mean, on the other hand, who knows? The one thing that Pierre Poilievre can be relied upon, Aaron, is to find new ways to alienate people. And I've said on the show before, take Trudeau out of the equation, you may see those numbers change right quick.
Yeah, or, that's funny because I think to myself, and I heard them discussing that earlier today, take Trudeau out of the equation and it changes nothing for the Liberals.
No, yeah. I'm not entirely sure about that. I would be the first to say he has done tremendous damage. I think there are a lot of people out there who are listening to us right now who are basically saying, okay, you know what, I'll stay home, or I'll vote NDP, or whatever. I think if you give them a viable leader, and quite frankly, with all due respect, Mark Carney is not the guy. The last time they drafted, how can I put it, a relief pitcher from London, England, by the name of Ignatieff, it did not go well for the Federal Liberal Party. So let's put that to one side. Okay. And by the way, this is still a federal party that has yet to be led by a woman. So they might want to consider that when they're shopping around for a new leader. I think, honestly, the support that we see, 20 points, 22 points for the lead for the Poilievre Conservatives, I think it's 50 miles wide, but in most cases, an inch and a half deep. Yeah, it's deep out west. But once again, Quebec, Ontario, even out east, I think if there's a viable choice offered to voters that does not involve having to tell yourself the country you're in is broken and it should be hated from one end to the other, I think they're going to jump at that chance. I think the question now is how much time has Justin Trudeau left for the party he has brought absolutely to the edge of a cliff, and can it be pulled out of the fire? I'm not sure it can, but, stranger things have happened.
Jim, I want to go from that into our question for today. I'm curious what you think about this. There have been some people now, we have the highest high school dropout rate in Quebec, in the country, by the way, well ahead of provinces like Ontario. And there are people saying, you know what, it's time we consider getting rid of homework. I'm going to ask this as my question. I did to start the show. I'm just curious what you would think of that.
I heard you talking about this before. You're not talking to a guy who's a big fan of homework. I did it.
Okay.
I thought it was a waste of time then. I think, if anything, just in terms of learning, but you have to be careful what you assign. I think assigned reading at home would be perhaps a good way to keep people in school, so long as what you're reading is going to be of some use to you. But all that said, depending on what you send them home with, when I see kids, like I said this before, when I see kids coming back from elementary school, grade 1, grade 2, and they've got their school bags, and they're carrying more gear, Aaron, than a paratrooper about to be dropped over Normandy on D-Day, there's something wrong with that picture. And I think, down the road, we look at a high dropout rate. Remember, the economy stinks. And yeah, you know what? A lot of people are saying, I'd much rather have a job that I want to do right now than go to school and get a high school leaving certificate and still not be able to get a job. And that's one of the big things that the CAQ government has been trying to deal with. It hasn't worked. But bottom line, I think homework, yeah, but you know what? Be far more discriminating about what you assign and make sure that what you assign is necessary as opposed to rote. It doesn't work.
We will pick it up from there. Jim, thank you. Appreciate it.
Adam,